Almost. All right, guys. Let's talk about StarCraft. Hey guys, it's the episode number 100 where I talk about myself, which is really different for me because normally I just talk about StarCraft. For today, I'm really excited because if you asked me 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, like, hey, what's your favorite memory from StarCraft or gaming growing up and stuff, I would just have nothing to say. I'd be like, oh man, I don't know, there's so much. But all I think about is like strategies all day, and I feel like all my memories are kind of like pushed into the back of my brain. And basically, a lot of people have been requesting this. They've been like, hey, episode 100's coming up. You know, you're going to do the day 9 thing, right? You're going to talk about your life of StarCraft. And I was like, oh, at first I was like, I don't really want to do that. I don't know if I've got that much to talk about. Like, not that many good stories and memories come to mind. I know I had a great time with StarCraft. I know I really enjoy it, but I don't know if I can just talk about it for that long. And since then, it's just been sitting in the back of my head. And whenever I'm just chilling out, I keep thinking to myself, like, hey, who was like my biggest influence in StarCraft? Who was my biggest influence growing up? And I started to just kind of think about all these memories going back to since I was a little kid growing up gaming, since I was first getting into StarCraft II, learning from other pro gamers. And this whole like flood of memories came back to me and all these different crazy experiences I've had. So I was like, you know what? We're going to do an episode 100. We're going to talk about StarCraft. We're going to talk about growing up gaming, and just hopefully give you guys a bit more insight into myself. But also, I want to kind of, I guess, talk about my development of how I learned to understand games as I grew up and how I started to come into contact with ideas of macro and micro. And I think a big theme is probably like recovering whenever I screw up and learning to get back on my feet and get back up there. But I mean, without further ado, let's dive into it. This is going to be a bit different for me. I'm not as good a presenter as someone like Day 9, so I don't want you to expect it to be like that. But this is just going to be a very personal episode. It's going to go for a long time. I'll split it into probably 2 one-hour VODs or something like that. But anyway, let's just talk about it. So first of all, to understand me and my life of gaming, I was thinking back and I was like, how did I get into gaming so much? And the biggest influence was my brother. My older brother, Anthony, or Anth, as we used to call him, is like the biggest nerd you guys will ever meet. He's a lawyer right now, but as a little kid, ever since he was really little, super into games. Absolutely loved it. He's about 2.5, 3 years older than me. So growing up, he was the first one who actually taught me how to read books. I remember when I was like 5 or 6 years old, he was giving me these thick like fantasy novels and like teaching me how to read them and stuff. And we just had great memories growing up. It was just us 2 brothers. We now have 2 younger kid brothers, but he would just teach me how to read these books. Do you guys remember the Redwall novels? Basically, it's like fantasy novels, except with like mice and like rabbits and stuff fighting with like swords and bows and everything. They're actually amazing. You can even read them as an adult and actually really enjoy them. I remember we got really into Lone Wolf Choose Your Own Adventure books. If you guys probably all remember like Goosebumps Choose Your Own Adventure. That was like the peasant stuff. We were into the hardcore stuff. We were into Lone Wolf, where it had its own combat system, which was like a Dungeons and Dragons style thing. You had like items and potions you could use. You'd have like your stat sheets and stuff. Super nerdy stuff we got into from a very young age. Whenever we were on family holidays or anything, we'd just be playing this stuff. And I guess I was always a bit more casual than my brother, but some of his enthusiasm would always leach over onto me. Like, we'd be on a family holiday, we'd have no games, no books or anything, for whatever reason, or we were bored of them, and he would just get like a pen and paper, and he would start making games. He would like cut out pieces and like write names of them. He's like, okay, these are orcs. Orcs have 8 hit points, they do 6 damage, their initiative is 5, and he'd come up with this entire like rule set, and we'd just have pieces of paper with names of units on them, and we'd like move them around and get them to combat each other. And if we didn't have a dice to roll for like, attacks, then we'd just use the Lone Wolf books, what they do. You'd have like a grid of numbers on a page and you'd close your eyes and you'd just poke onto the page and you'd get a random number and that would be your dice roll. So we were like the nerdiest little kids. We loved playing games. It's pretty much all we ever did. Reading Lord of the Rings when I was young, all that sort of stuff. We were super into it. So for us, I think we were already kind of destined to get very obsessed with video games when we got access to them. And I remember the first time when my dad brought home a computer. Didn't tell us he was doing it at all. It was probably like 1996. And he brought home this big fat CRT monitor. This is back when computers were always beige. They were always beige. It probably had like 32 megabytes of RAM and like a 200 megahertz processor or something. But to us, it was like the most godlike box of power ever. And I think he had Warcraft 2. He'd borrowed off a friend. Basically, we just got obsessed with this computer from a super young age. I remember being about 8 years old when we got that computer, and sitting there playing the Command and Conquer campaign, playing Warcraft 2, and we were just blown away by it. It was incredible. Apparently, we had a computer when we were much younger, but I was too young to even remember it. So for me, this was like my first video game experience, and I still remember just like my eyes lighting up and just being glued to this screen. And when we first started out, my dad was super into it as well. So he'd be playing like Warcraft 2, and me and my little brother would be standing behind him or sitting behind him, and we'd be like, do this, no, build more footmen. We'd just be like telling him what to do, and he'd get angry at us as well when he'd get to the later levels, and it would get really hard, and he'd be like, shut up, stop telling me what to do. And he'd actually like make us leave the room, and then we'd like try to like watch through the doorway or something like that because we were so into it. So strategy games were just naturally like a big part of growing up. You know, RTS games were just by chance were the first games that we really got in contact with. Me and my brother from then, every time we'd be playing, we'd always be sitting side by side or one behind the other, telling the other one what to do, inevitably fighting over whose turn it was to play on the computer. We'd just, we'd get pretty angry with each other. It's like, no, I finished this level really quick. It's not fair. And it's like, no, you're only meant to play one level. And I'd get really angry, and I'd just try to keep my go, but my brother was always bigger, so he'd just, push me off or whatever. Or he'd use logic, and being older than me, he'd like just be able to argue his way to victory every time, and I'd just be like, you're an idiot, like I was terrible at arguing. I was terrible at doing that. He'd also get really devious as well. He'd distract me. I don't know if he probably would deny this even happens, because he's very innocent in his own memories. But he would do things like he'd get a new fantasy book, and he'd be like, hey, Jared, check out this book. This is really cool. And he'd give it to me just as his go starts, or as his go on the computer's coming to an end. So I'd start reading this book in the other room, and I'd get really into this awesome fantasy novel. So I'd forget that it was my turn to play on the computer, and he'd just like sit there like frantically playing as many games as he could for like 5 hours. And then I'd be like, wait, I was meant to be doing something. I was like, God damn it, it's my go. And he's like, ha ha. And our parents would come home and be like, get off the computer, kids. So there was a lot of funny memories growing up. Whenever we were away from the PC, we were always talking about how to beat levels. I remember there was this Warcraft II mission where you had to take an island at the start, and then it was a very Navy-focused mission. And every time I'd end up kind of pinned in on this island, and the ships would come and kill my shipyard before it finished. And I couldn't figure out how to fight them. And then I'd come up with plans of like building cannon towers on the edge of the water and getting catapults and all sorts of stuff. And I remember whenever I wasn't at the computer, I was always coming up with a plan for how to beat the mission the next time. I remember the later missions in Warcraft 2, we started theory crafting when we weren't on the computer, because we kept, basically in old RTS missions, in campaigns, it was just there's a base with like 1 billion dudes in it and towers, and it doesn't really have AI. The units are just kind of chilling around the base, or the AI was very basic. So you'd attack a building, and all the units would come out of their base. So they'd naturally have walls, and there'd be like a path into their base, and there'd be towers everywhere. So, I remember the first time we thought we'd done the sickest thing, we came up with this sick strategy, was you'd get a catapult, and you'd just shoot the towers from just out of range. You'd be like, yeah. But then every time we do this, they'd come out, and our units would kind of run into the tower range and die, and it was really awkward. So then we figured out Blizzard and Death and Decay, these area effect spells, and we just literally just camp outside their base and just throw down this spell, and their army would run into it. And that would be our whole game plan, to just like whittle them down by doing this. Eventually we evolved it to add in a squad of berserkers or elven rangers behind that. And if you guys ever played Warcraft 2, basically they're like the most cost-inefficient, terrible unit. But as kids, we thought they were awesome, because you'd have your line of ranged units, your catapult would hit the tower, which would bait their army to come out, and then you'd drop this like blizzard on top of them, and their army would run into its death. And it would take us hours to finish these missions. It's funny, because I replayed Warcraft 2 like a year ago, and it's still an incredibly fun, satisfying game. But it was really funny thinking about how different it was when I played it as a young kid, and how it took us just hours and hours of working together trying to figure our way through these missions. And it was something which I have really fond memories of. So moving on from there, We were playing kind of Warcraft 2, Command and Conquer. Dark Reign was a game we loved playing. Red Alert when it came out. But one of the big things, which I would say got me into multiplayer gaming, was actually not a video game. It was Warhammer. And if any of you guys played Warhammer, you would know that it's super awesome. I actually just bought Total War Warhammer, which is the fantasy Warhammer, which is the badass kind. I played Orcs and Goblins. They were my first kind of swarm-style race in a strategy game. You just have tons of just goblins and orcs, and you don't really give a shit, and they're super random. They all just YOLO, super melee-focused army. Your archers are pretty terrible. You've got some really powerful but inconsistent artillery. You've got like catapults that shoot goblins, which like fly their way into the enemy and like explode and stuff. And I remember I just loved this like very different kind of swarmy style of army, right? I remember my favorite unit was the Night Goblin Fanatics. If you guys ever played Warhammer, sickest unit. Basically, you've got a group of Night Goblins. They're shitty goblins. They're not worth that many points. But what they do is they get their magic mushrooms. They imbue them with magic. They feed them to one dude who just gets super like mentally fucked up, gets like 10 times stronger. They give him a big ball and chain, this fat metal ball. And then when you get close to the enemy, you know, these guys are disguised in your ranks. The enemy can't see them. Your dudes just like push them out into battle. And basically these dudes just like run towards the enemy, swinging these ball and chains and just like go through enemy units, just killing like heaps of dudes. The only problem is they're completely random. So half the time they'll turn around and run back through your own army, or they'll go sideways through like 3 regiments in a row and just like decimate your own dudes. And I also love this like kind of random chaotic element to the race, where you're like, yeah, it's okay to risk my own units. I don't mind doing a bit of friendly fight. Yeah, it's all right. My guys are expendable. But it's about kind of thriving in the chaos and that sort of stuff. So we had so much fun with Warhammer. I remember my brother would always beat me because he was always better strategically than me. He always understood strategy a bit better. He was more of a macro player. I was always a guy who would bet on one particular thing doing really well. And there had to be 100% chance of that one thing working at the cost of everything else in my army. So normally, if you guys have never played Warhammer, basically you have your 2 battle lines, you'll have your archers behind. It goes for like 7 or 8 turns. You just kind of move together and you kind of engage, right? I would always put heaps and heaps of points, right? Depending on how good your units are, they use points. Both sides have to have equal points. Like you do a 2,000 point battle or a 3,000 point battle where each of you have 3,000 points in your army. And I remember I would always just dump a disproportionate amount of points into like my Boar Boys squad. Orcs riding boars. I'd have like 15 of these, which is like an unnecessarily large regiment, just being sure that I could like break the first unit they'd charge into and then like break through that flank and mess up their battle line. And I'd also have like a black orc hero on a wyvern with like some ridiculously expensive magic amulet, which gives him this awesome ward save. So I'd have these 2 units I'd count on like massacring my opponents, and everything else I'd skimp on, and they'd all just inevitably get totally wrecked, while my 2 important units would wreck the enemy's units. So it's so funny looking back on it, like how limited my strategic mindset was, because it was just like, yeah, basically these things have to kill everything, and I'm not going to invest points in the other things, because it's like, if there's not 100% chance of it working, I wouldn't see the point in doing it. Everything was very black and white. There was no flexibility in how I would play. So me and my brother's friend, we had this group of my brother's friends, and we'd always all play Warhammer together. And his one friend, Yongza, he played Dark Elves. And he was about on my level strategically. We were both not that great. So we would always have the sickest games. I have the best memories of his Night Elf army and my Orc army. And every time he'd do the same sort of thing as me. He'd overinvest in a few units being overpowered. And in like the first turn of our armies clashing, both sides of our flanks would just like crumble, and the armies would just like turn in on each other, and units would be getting flanked, and immediately our archers and artillery would be exposed, and there'd be like light cavalry diving into each other's archers and massacring them, and the whole game would devolve into chaos, and everything would be dying, and we'd get to the end of the game, and we'd have like a quarter of the board each. We're trying to control sections of the board because you get more victory points for that, and it would almost always be a draw every single time we played. So this was one of the first times I really experienced the exhilaration of kind of strategy, multiplayer combat, getting that chaos going. It was so much fun. Absolutely loved Warhammer. Played it for years. I haven't played it since forever. I'm kind of sad I never finished like painting that many of my units or anything like that. There was a lot of battles with a lot of just gray and silver units walking around, but Warhammer will always have a special spot in my memory. So from there, you know, I was still very basic strategically, right? I didn't really have that much understanding, but we were still playing RTS games. And it was around this time we started figuring out how to use our modem to dial into our friend's computer to play strategy games. So we had our 28.8K modem. I don't know if anyone ever had one of those. Most people had 33K modems. It was terribly slow. And basically you'd have to actually call your friend's IP address. So you'd go into like Warcraft II was the first game we tried. Then we played a few games of Red Alert as well. You'd connect to each other's things. And it was so much fun. I remember the first time actually playing someone in a video game, RTS. I was like, holy shit. And we sucked. We had no idea what we were doing. I remember Warcraft 2, we kind of found it a bit awkward because the orcs always seemed to win, which in hindsight, yes. If you look at multiplayer Warcraft 2, everyone played orc because Bloodlust was way more powerful than healing on paladins. Yeah, and basically we very quickly moved on to Red Alert. And I'll always remember the first time I ever like raged at a game and got angry at a game designer was playing Red Alert. So I was playing one of my brother's friends or one of my mates, I can't remember who, and he had this huge army of heavy tanks in the original Red Alert coming across this big bridge and pushing into my base. And I was like, oh shit, oh, you know, and I was getting pushed back. I didn't have nearly as many tanks out. And I was like, oh, I know, I'm gonna nuke his tanks. So I can't even remember how you used nukes in that game or how you got them, but basically I nuked this massive army of tanks choked up on this bridge. Think about this in StarCraft. Someone's pushing through a choke point with that army. I'm talking one of those Avillo GIFs, one of those disgusting Reddit GIFs where the whole army just gets massacred. Except for the fact that tanks did about 5% of the damage to a tank. They'd kill infantry, they'd kill buildings in 1 or 2 shots, and they did almost nothing to tanks. I remember as this little like 8 or 10-year-old kid sitting there and I was like, ugh, I was like giggling to myself. This nuke was coming down and it just did nothing. And health bars didn't show up back then, so I was just utterly confused. I remember like clicking on the individual tanks and checking their hit points and they were all almost at full life and I was like, this is bullshit. And just like full raging, just hitting, just being like, this is unfair. Westwood are idiots. They don't know how to design a game, learn to balance. Obviously, I wasn't saying all that stuff, but I was pretty angry. I was pretty mad. And I remember that being like the first time I was just like, this game is stupid, kind of like got frustrated and walked away for a game. We played quite a few matches of this, but very quickly we realized that if anyone called our home phone while we were playing, it would disconnect us. So we almost never finished a match. So we started taking the phone off the hook so no one could call us to interrupt the modem. And our parents quickly figured out what we were doing because they were missing important phone calls. This is before people had mobile or cell phones. And they basically just banned us from playing online by calling our friends with the modem. So that kind of came to an end very quickly. When you never really finish any of your games, you always get disconnected, your parents are telling you you're not allowed to. We lost interest pretty quickly. We had Warhammer to play, we had single player campaigns. So we were like, oh, all right, that was exhilarating, that was fun, but our parents are pretty mad. Let's lay off that for now. The dial-up days, I know, right? So terrible. So from this point, I remember, you know, the first time I started doing worse at school. Not really worse at school because it was primary school where everything's really easy, but I started falling asleep in school. And it was because I was waking up every morning at 4:30 to play a text-based MMO game called Archmage. If you guys don't know what a text-based game is, it's a game where there's literally no graphics. Everything is told to you through text. I'm sure there's a few youngsters watching who are like, what the, who the shit plays that? Really cool game. Basically, you're like a mage and you get turns in real time. So you have to log on each day, play for like 20 minutes, use all your turns up, and you just basically get armies and you can invade other players and steal their land and stuff. And it's all dictated to you in text. Very fun game. I used to always try to get to the top of the leaderboard and there'd be like guilds of people that would actually organize and they'd all raid me one after the other. And I'd be like, this is unfair. These guys are all ganging up on me. What a bunch of losers. It's because they're not as good as me. That's why they can't play solo. Even back then, I was very elitist and stupid in how I played games. Like I refused to play games the way other people played them. I was always like, no, it's all about me playing on my own, even though this whole game is based on getting in guilds and clans and grouping up and ganging your opposition and that sort of stuff. I would always just try to play on my own and think specifically through choosing the right army composition I could win. And eventually I got bored of it because I did get caught My alarm would set off at 4:30 a.m. every morning to wake up to sneakily get on the computer because I wasn't allowed on. And it would like wake up my parents. But they were too lazy to figure out what was going on. And then eventually I think they got a call from my teacher and she was like, yeah, Jared keeps just sleeping in class and falling asleep at school. Is there something going on with him? And then they caught me one morning. They came down when the alarm went off and I'm there at like 5 in the morning, hunched over this keyboard in the dark, frantically playing my game. And I was like, okay. And I think my parents were just like, what the hell's wrong with you, you weirdo? Like, what the shit are you doing? And I was just like, what, man? I'm playing my game. I think that was the first time I was pretty obsessed with the game. And it's probably a precursor of the rest of my life playing video games and being super obsessed, but it was a lot of fun. Of course, my parents got even more restrictive on computer time after that. They were already pretty anti it because my dad himself, like he found himself getting addicted to games like Warcraft II and he was like, no, we're not playing these games anymore. They're too addictive. They're bad for, you're focusing on other things. So me and my brother became a very good team. Me and Anf, we worked together to get around his stuff. One of us would be playing, the other one would be like kind of watching, kind of looking to see if my parents would come down the stairs. Our gaming room was downstairs, their room was upstairs. And the moment they would, we'd like turn the monitor off and quickly pretend to be doing homework. My dad eventually figured this out because he heard the exceptionally loud computer buzzing. Computers were so loud back then. Normally my dad wouldn't notice. It's just there like, and we're just there like with the monitors off, like hoping he wouldn't notice. Eventually he comes in, he's like, what is that humming? And he realizes the computer's on and we'd done the genius move of turning the monitor off. And he was like, oh, you little shits. So he started taking the monitor cable away. So this was a back and forth battle we had for a few years. Me and my brother found another monitor cable. Maybe we bought it or something. We found another one somewhere. Maybe we got it from school or a friend. And we basically just hid that in one of our drawers. So my parents, whenever they would go out or whenever they were upstairs, we thought we'd get away with it. We'd pull out this monitor cable, we'd plug it in, and we'd play. And we'd use the exact same technique. And my dad would be like, what's that humming? He'd come downstairs because it was his study where it was in, right? But that's where we'd do our homework because there were desks in there. And he'd be like, what's that humming? And he'd be like, oh, well, these kids don't have a monitor cable. They couldn't be playing the computer. It can't be that. And he'd just walk off. And we thought we were geniuses. We were little shits, really. I remember another time he found out we had the monitor cable. I think my mum found it when she was doing laundry or something. She took that away. We're like, shit. But then Windows 98 came out. And for anyone who doesn't remember Windows 98, this was one of the state-of-the-art Windows systems. This was brand new. We'd upgraded from Windows 95, and it had a password built into it. So literally you couldn't log in unless you knew the password. My dad was like, haha, don't even need to take the monitor cable away anymore, kids. Plug this in. And we were like, oh, all right, cool. How the fuck do we get around this? And we sat there for weeks trying to figure out his password. We were doing combinations of birth dates and names and initials and months. And we were trying to figure it out. And I remember it was like one afternoon after school, no one was home, and I was sitting there trying passwords, and I got really frustrated because we'd been doing this for weeks. And then I just clicked the X in the top right box of the login, and it just closed the login, and it just logged into Windows. Yeah. It literally just logged you into Windows when you pressed the X. So we'd been trying for weeks to figure out this password. And I figured this out by accident, just in a moment of rage. I pressed the X, the fucking X in the top right corner, and it just closed the login box and logged us in. We were like, oh my God, we have a new way to access the computer. Later on, Windows XP came out. It had a proper safe password system. We figured out how to spam F8 to go into the BIOS, go into safe mode, create a new admin account, which we would then delete after using it. But it got harder and harder to play games at home, basically, throughout my whole time growing up, because my parents just were not keen on us playing games. They'd almost never let us play, because inevitably, right when they'd be at the point where they're like, yeah, I think it's time to let these kids play some video games, they'd catch us already finding a way around their obstacles and playing anyway. So we were constantly finding ways to get on the computer and just be little shits. And then I finished primary school. For us, primary school is up to 6th grade, and high school is 7th to 12. We just split it into two systems, if you guys do it differently. So I started high school, 7th grade, 12 years old, right? And I was at school one day, and my friends were like, hey man, we're going to King's. Do you want to come down? And I was like, Kings, what's Kings? And they're like, oh, it's an internet cafe. And I was like, what the shit is an internet cafe? And they're like, yeah, well, it's this room. It's got all these computers. They're all networked so you can play against each other. And there's this sick game called Counter-Strike, and it's so awesome. It's a shooter game. You kill terrorists, and it's super realistic. The guns like kill you instantly. It's not like those old crappy games. And I was like, whoa, that sounds cool. So we went down to King's, and this is like an entire chapter of my childhood is spending time at internet cafes. And specifically this one, my local internet cafe. Holy shit. Go down there. My friends like, yeah, they showed me how to get into CS. They showed me how to buy a P90. I don't even know how to buy ammo. I'm just running around. Took me like 5 rounds to kill one person because I'm just spraying. I don't know how the guns work or anything. Before that, playing games like Doom and everything when you're younger, the guns would just shoot. Like, you didn't have recoil or anything like that. And suddenly recoil and spray patterns came in. It was really cool. I remember after a few rounds, my friends were like, hey man, how are you doing? Like, what's your name? And I was like, oh, what do you mean? And they're like, oh, you need to have an ID. You got to have an alias, man. You got to make an in-game name so we know who you are. And, everyone there is referring to each other by their in-game names, like shouting across to each other. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I chose the best name ever, Fat Pig Sucker. That's right, guys, Fat Pig Sucker. Probably the most embarrassing couple of years of my childhood. I was known as Fat Pig Sucker at this internet cafe. I remember I would proudly proclaim, people would be like, Fat Pig Sucker, what kind of a stupid name is that? And I'd be like, well, am I a fat pig that sucks? Or do I suck fat pigs? What the fuck? I wish I could teleport back in time and just like slap myself. Like, you're such a loser, you little 12-year-old shit. That's not funny at all. You're just a weirdo. 12-year-old me thought this was hilarious. I thought my name was amazing. I thought I was like the coolest kid ever. Got super into CS, got known as Fat Pig Sucker for a long time there. It was $2 an hour to go to this internet cafe. And soon enough, every Saturday and Sunday, we would go there. Me and my friends would ride our bikes down to the internet cafe. We didn't have allowances or anything, so we'd have to beg our parents for money. Very quickly, they found out where we were going, or, we'd tell them, honestly, if it's, oh, we're going to King's, it's an internet cafe to play games. It's only $2 an hour. Can I just have $6 or $8 or something, please? And my parents would be like, no. Well, at first, they'd give us some coins. Then eventually, like, no, you go there all the time. You don't need money. Of course, there was a jar of coins in my house for, like, the buses, and I'd just steal money from there, like, every day. My parents somehow never realized I was stealing money. Or they probably did, they just didn't care. I don't know. I feel like they probably knew everything I was up to. There was just certain things they didn't bother to call me out on. I thought I was like a genius, stealing like $4 or $6 each day, going down to the internet cafe and shooting some people in Counter-Strike. We had so much fun there. It was like our entire life. I remember one particular story was really funny, actually. Well, it stands out in my memory. It's not all that funny. Basically, I was about to go to school one morning, and I was sitting there eating breakfast, and my mum comes upstairs with my friend Josh from school. And she's like, oh, hey, Josh is here. He says you guys are walking to school today. That's weird. You don't normally do that. And I was like, oh, no, like, yeah, we are. Like, I didn't even know what was going on. Literally, we hadn't planned this at all. And he's like, yeah, we're going to walk to school. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. So I finish eating breakfast. We go downstairs, and he's like, quick, pack some clothes, man, because we have to wear school uniforms in Australia. He's like, quick, bring some school clothes. Bring some non-school clothes. Let's skip school today. And I was like, skip school? And I'm 12 years old, or maybe I was like barely 13 at this point. I was super young. I was still reasonably nerdy. And I was like, oh, I don't know, man. We're going to get in trouble. And he's just like, nah, man, it'll be fine. We'll forge a note afterwards saying we were sick. I can forge my parents' signature. I can do one that looks really good. I'll do your one as well. It'll look legit. It's fine. I've done it before. And I was like, oh, I still don't know, man. Like, what are we going to do skipping school all day? And he's just like, let's go to King's. Let's go play games. And I was like, instantly my eyes light up and I'm like, play video games? Yeah, let's skip school. Instantly just throw some clothes in my bag like, Mom, see ya, going to school. We go off, we find like a park, we go into the toilet, get changed out of our clothes, thinking we're the most rebellious little kids ever. Go to the internet cafe, we just like wait outside until they open. We're like the first kids in there. It's so obvious we're skipping school. What are a bunch of little 13-year-old boys with backpacks on doing at like, 10 a.m. on a Tuesday or something. Basically, we're sitting there playing games, having the best time of our life. We thought we were badasses. Halfway through the day, I'm like killing him in Counter-Strike. I'm like, yeah, I just messed you up, man. I look up and my mum's just standing like behind my monitor. I think she had like the pram with my youngest brother had just been born, or my middle brother. And she's just there with this pram looking at me like, caught you, dickhead. Like, obviously she didn't say that. But yeah, she was super smug about it. She wasn't like, I caught you yelling or anything. She was just like, haha, you little shit. I guessed where you were. And I was like, what the hell? How did she know? Obviously, like my friend never comes over. He comes over. We're both acting a little bit sus in the morning. But the real thing that turned it over, my friend at school, who I would always hang out with, we didn't plan this or anything. He just assumed I was sick because I wasn't at school. So he calls my home and he's like, hey, is Jared there? Is he sick? Can I talk to him? So my mom answered the phone and was like, no, aren't you at school? He's like, yeah, I'm at school. He's not here. Thanks a lot. I think it was Xander, my best friend in like 7th grade. And I was super mad at him because my mom basically calls up my school. Is like, yeah, he skipped school today. Give him as much detention as you possibly can so that he never does it again. Got in trouble. Had like a month and a half of detention after school. It was massive pain in the ass. First time I'd ever been in trouble at school. It was really funny because everyone in there was the kids who were like smoking pot and skipping school every day, getting in fights. They've all got those really dirty haircuts that kids in school think make them badass. So they look like they're in a gang or something, like rat tails and mullets and shit. And they're all like the cool kids. And I'm just this nerdy kid sitting in there like every Wednesday after school for like a month and a half. Like, oh, this is eye-opening. Like, and I start getting to know these guys a bit more as well. But that was really funny. So eventually, let's skip through some stuff. Otherwise, I'm going to talk forever about pre-StarCraft. And StarCraft is really where, for me, I think this story gets a lot more interesting. I just want to give you guys kind of, I guess, the highlight of my childhood and why I was so into games, but also why I wasn't involved in online games. I didn't get much access at home. I didn't get into forums or find out about pro gaming. So as a result, I was always pretty pleb. Like I never really improved that much. I got competitive, but it was always, let's be the top of the local pub, super casual scene. Let's be the best at the internet cafe. I remember there was a time when everyone started wall hacking in Counter-Strike. And this was something which really grinded my gears because every other kid was just like, oh, the cool kids are doing it now. We can't tell them to stop or they'll beat us up or, tell us to fuck off. So we all have to cheat now. And literally you could walk around this internet cafe and everyone would be able to see through walls. And I was the one kid who was sitting there just shaking my head at everyone disapprovingly like, you pieces of crap. Like I get irrationally mad when people cheat at games. I'm just like, oh, right. So you're a worthless piece of human scum. Okay. Like I get really super elitist about this. I get like really on my high horse. And I remember everyone's like, well, it's just a game, man. It's just a game. Like they're doing it. So like we might as well do it. At least it's even this way. And I was just like, no, it takes the fun out of it. Like it's stupid. I don't even know if it was like the principle. I think for me, it was just, I couldn't comprehend why you would want to cheat because that took the fun out of the game. Like all my friends, whenever they played a campaign in Age of Empires or StarCraft or Warcraft, they'd always just use the cheat codes and go through the missions. And for me, I grew up gaming from a young age. So for me, I was like, what's the point? It doesn't make sense. I was like, no, that shit is terrible. Screw that. And I've got lots of friends nowadays who are into competitive gaming who used to do that as well. But I was always like, I will not cheat. So this became a challenge for me. And this, I think, was actually a point where I got a lot better at Counter-Strike within my own little shit scene, specifically because everyone was hacking. And I took it as a challenge where I was like, nah, I'm not going to hack, but I'm still going to beat you all, tell you how much you suck, and then you're all going to swap back to not hacking once you accept me as your king and lord of Counter-Strike. This was like the thinking that went on in my head. If I can destroy everyone so convincingly while not hacking, then they will all have to listen to me. So I had this entire kind of vaguely planned out idea of that. And at first I was really frustrated, right? Because people would know where I'm coming from. And my entire way of playing Counter-Strike was flank, figure out the positioning of where everyone is, and come from an unexpected angle. Run up behind 3 people and spray them down, right? I hadn't really refined my aiming that much. So it was all about positioning and coming from a surprising angle. And I started realizing this wouldn't work because they could see me. So I started realizing I just needed to aim faster than them without any idea of where they were going to come from. So I started to turn my sensitivity up, something which is probably a terrible idea now, but it worked for the time. Turned it up super high. And I started just getting used to doing these flick shots. I started getting used to doing these like just pure instinct, pure flick shots. And I started getting really good at it. And I was still struggling sometimes against the top guys because they were almost as good as me anyway, and they were wall hacking, so they'd still be beating me. So I started to practice with a scout as well. I was like, not only do I need to flick shot, but I need to headshot people with my flick shots if I want to be actually being really consistent. So I started practicing just with a scout and just running around and just bam, headshot. And I actually got really good for my internet cafe, and I'd always be at the top of the frag board or second place, depending on who was there. Sometimes there'd be a few of the really good guys all on the same team working together, and I couldn't, I'd get killed too much. But I was always super proud. My ego, my E-peen would start to grow. I'd be like, that's right, fuckers, you all cheat. I don't, and I'm beating you in frags. You're all worthless human beings. You can tell there's a bit of rage that comes out of me when people cheat. I am King Fat Pig Sucker. Exactly. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. I got a lot better at playing because of people hacking. I remember though, I still always did it by feel. I never, don't get me wrong, I was no guy who sat there thinking about how to refine this. It just happened naturally, and that was the only way I learned video games. I had a good friend, Ben Hoken, who I haven't hung out with in a really long time actually, but he started to get really good at Counter-Strike. He would line up shots at walls. He'd do the thing where you stand there and you know where their head's going to pop out and you just shoot them in the head. Whereas I was still just running around using my instincts and using Twitch micro, right? I was just like, bam, bam, bam. And so I just run around a corner and he just headshot me. Run around a corner and he headshot me. And I was like, you're fucking cheating. This is bullshit. I was so mad. I remember when he first started doing this, I was raging. And I was like, no. And then he's like, no, I'll show you. Like, I've been studying how the really good players do it. And he's showing me like, oh, you line up the shot here with this piece of terrain, you're going to get a headshot. And I remember just being really irrational about it and being like, no, that's stupid. That's not fun. That's camping. That's camping. Camping is stupid. This is the same thing as in StarCraft where you say that's cheesing. Like attacking is cheesing. You can't ever attack. It was this same sort of just illogical thinking like, no, I don't want to do it your way. Your way is dumb. It's stupid. It's cheap, right? And I refused to do it. So I just constantly have to surprise him and, try to work my way around corners really quickly and try to be really unpredictable so he couldn't get the headshots. I started learning how to do the double hop, like the bunny hops and the bounces and stuff to shoot over walls. I just had to actually learn how to use the mechanics a little bit better, but I still refused to play properly the way he was starting to learn how to do. And this is this mega stubborn streak, which I really didn't unlearn until StarCraft II came out. Like, I never was methodical in how I improved. I was super just like set in my ways. No, you just play the game. You don't learn builds. You don't copy other people. I play my way, and that's how you play games. So I was still very unserious in my competitive gaming, whilst being super anal, angry person who wanted to kill everyone in video games. Oh my God. Okay, so finishing up two more stories to finish up this kind of period of my life, this internet cafe young period. First of all, oh my God, you guys will not believe, if any of you guys didn't have an internet cafe in your city or you didn't have this whole craze get as big as it did in Sydney here back around 2001, holy shit, you missed out on some of the funniest stuff ever. Literally everybody was playing Counter-Strike. Everybody would come to the internet cafe. Every day on Wednesdays, we'd finish school early. So everyone at my school would go there and there'd be like 200 people squeezed into this tiny little room. You'd have to go up these stairs to get in there, by the way. It's like, there's a bakery and there's this tiny little dark stairs that you think might lead to a brothel next to it. You go up there and it's this dark room that used to be like a tiny dance studio or something. They've got like one PowerPoint on the wall, which they've plugged a 20 plug adapter into, and they've plugged another 20 plug adapter into that. They've got every computer plugged into this. Dirtiest, shittiest place. There was like a couch in there where there'd always, without fail, be a skater or two sleeping on the couch for some reason. The place would constantly have power outages. I remember once we were there, the power was out for like half an hour. Everyone's just sitting in the dark, waiting for the power to come back on. This electrician comes in. He's like, what the fuck is this setup? And he's talking to the owner like next to us. And he's like, you realize this is like illegal in so many ways. There's like so many fire hazards and stuff. But it was so popular that everyone would come there. I remember a few times when it was very popular, there would be these 25 to 30-year-old big steroid guys who would come in and they would get mad. Like literally every time they got shot in Counter-Strike, you would hear this thump because they'd bash the table, they'd stomp on the floor, and they'd be like, fuck. They'd like swear, they'd go crazy. And these guys would then proceed to look at who's shot them in the top right of the screen. They go, all right, who the fuck is Fat Pig Sucker? If you ever shoot me again, I will come and beat the shit out of you. And we're all like nerdy kids. We're all like 13 to 20, a few younger kids, not many. And these guys are like these big beefed up guys who look like they're in a gang. And we're like, oh shit. But it's Counter-Strike. What are we going to do? Next time I see one, I kind of hesitate for a second. He's like spraying around like this because he has no idea how to play. And I'm like, well, I'm not just going to let you kill me. And I just like shoot him in the face. Bam! Table gets thumped. This guy stands up. He's like, who the fuck is Fat Pig Sucker? I'm going to kill you. And they did this not just with me. They did it with anyone that would kill them. And they would come around the internet cafe pressing tab on kids' computers while they were playing to see what their name was, to try and find the guy that had killed them so they could intimidate them. They said they were going to beat us up. They never did because we got so quick. We'd just be like, console, name, change name, instantly keep playing. They'd come press tab on your computer, different name. We got so good at doing this. And these guys would get so mad. And we were just like, we were really confused, right? Because it's very sad that a bunch of big buff dudes would threaten kids like this. It was really weird. But, you know, whatever. There's always scum in society, right? The last story of this internet cafe, really, big one was my first experience with macro and my entire competitive Brood War history. So obviously we're finally getting towards StarCraft, guys. Brood War. I love the campaign. I love StarCraft 1. It was one of the few things I actually wanted to do over playing Warhammer, was playing the StarCraft campaign. I loved it. Excuse me. I loved it, right? But didn't know about Battle.net, didn't know how multiplayer worked. Like I said, after our parents told us we couldn't call people's modems, we didn't really do it that much. And not many people would play at internet cafes. People don't play RTS games at internet cafes. They never did. CS was the game. People started playing tower defenses when Warcraft 3 came out, eventually Dota. Very rarely would you get people playing RTS games outside of the occasional use custom map settings. But one day I was there playing with my brother. We finished a game. And, we were just playing for a bit of fun. We were complete plebs. We'd, take one base at a time. It would mine out. We'd take another base. We'd try to build one of every unit. We were very campaign-oriented RTS players, even though we were probably better than most of the other people there. And one day we'd finished this game, and this Korean kid came up, and he's like, hey, I see you playing StarCraft. You think you're good? Do you want to play me? I challenge you. And this is something you'd occasionally get, even in CS or Dota or Warcraft. People would always challenge you to like a one-on-one. And that's like when the glove gets slapped on the table and your pride is on the line. Like you never say no to this because, then you're a pansy. I wouldn't anyway. A lot of kids would back out, but I'd be like, hell's no. Shit, he's Korean. Didn't know anything about esports. Everyone knew this sort of meme though, that like Koreans love StarCraft and there's something to do with pro-Korean StarCraft over in Korea. You didn't really know what it was, but there was this vague thing about Koreans and StarCraft that everybody knew at this point. It was probably like 2001 or something, right? Maybe 2002. Can't really remember exactly. And basically, yeah, he's like, all right, let's play. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. Let's fucking go, man. So I was like super nervous. I really wanted to win, so I'd have the bragging rights. And he hosts up the map. We get into game. Immediately, I pause the game at the start. And I'm like, dude, what the hell is this? Fastest map possible. It's a map where you have unlimited minerals and gas, and so you never need to expand. You can just build everything off one base. And for me, I never played multiplayer much, but I still understood, like, I mean, this isn't how you play an RTS. And I'm saying to him, like, this is not how you play RTS. This is dumb. If you just have unlimited resources, the game is meaningless, all right? Like, because like expanding and like taking parts of the map, that's like the fun, right? And he's like, no, this is what pros play. This is what he actually said. He's like, this is how pros test their skill. Like, this is how you can always see who the best player is. This is what the competitive mode is. I had no fucking clue what he was talking about, of course. But eventually I was like, whatever, I'll play your stupid unlimited resources map. And I never really knew about the term micro and macro up to this point. And this was the first thing that forced me to really engage with macro, because I've got unlimited resources. And I'm sitting there for the first minutes like, oh my God, I can build endless drones. It was Zerg versus Zerg. And I was like, just get this insane economy. I was like, I guess I just get double upgrades. Like, yeah, I can get 2 Evo chambers this game. I normally can't get that. Let's get Ultralisks. Let's just go straight to Ultralisks. You both just sit there. Like, there might have even been like No Rush 5 or something like that. Something stupid. And basically, I just massed Ultralisks. I get over to his base. He's built 400 spore crawlers on each side of his base. And he's just maxed out on lurkers, just burrowed in his base. And he's just sitting there, like, hands off the keyboard, like, yeah, I'm really good at this game. So I run in with like 20 Ultralisks and they just die and they don't do anything. I'm like, oh shit, what is this? Because I'm still building off like 2 hatcheries or something. I'm like slowly building my army. So then I build guardians. I'm like, well, guardians I think they can outrange spores, and the spores weren't covering all the lurkers. So I come in with guardians and overlords, and I start shooting back his lurkers, and then scourges pop out and just clear them out. And I'm like, shit, man, how do I break him? He wasn't even trying to attack or move out. He was just there like, I'm the best player in the world. This guy's never going to beat me. This was the Zergavillo of Brood War I was playing against. And I was just there like, oh, shit. Well, I'm struggling to get units out. I don't have enough lava. I know. Let's build macro hatcheries. Had never heard of the idea of a macro hatchery before, but I was like, I guess I need more production. So I went and I built 10 hatcheries, and I started rallying Ultralisks, and I still couldn't push in. So then I built 10 hatcheries outside his base, 1 on each hotkey, and I just set the rally points into his lurkers, and I just had overlords rallying in there as well, and I just sat there going, SUU, SUU, SUU. And I was just like, ooh, and this is the first time I learned how to macro, right? I was like just literally queuing up ultras off 10 hatcheries and slowly pushing through his lurkers. And then I built a round of guardians by surprise, and they started clearing out the spores and pushing into his lurkers more. He gets the scourges. He's frantically trying to morph more lurkers. I'm pushing him back more and more. I'm sitting there smashing that keyboard. This is the first time I had probably more than 30 APM in an RTS game because I'm just frantically trying to build Ultralisks to break him. And I'm pushing my way in. I'm halfway into his base. I'm almost on top of his hatcheries. I can see his lurkers trying to morph. He hasn't built a single other unit other than a lurker and a scourge, by the way. And then I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm about to break him. Game pauses, stands up, comes over to me. He's like, oh, sorry, man, I've got to go. I got to go home now. Yeah, got to be home for dinner. See you, man. Well played. Good draw. Just like tries to shake my hand. I'm like, draw? Are you fucking kidding me, man? You're about to lose. And he's like, nah, man, my strategy is unbeatable. I've never lost. Trust me, you wouldn't be able to beat me. I'm like, but I am beating you right now. Sit back down and play for 5 more minutes. This guy's like, nah, man, I've really got to go. We'll play another time. Good draw. Walks off, saves his pride intact. The classic just walk away when you're losing. I was like, I won this game, but I had to like tell myself, like, I did win this game. Like, I was going to win. I was pretty mad though. So that was my entire history with competitive Brood War. It was right there at that internet cafe where I kind of won bragging rights, but not quite. Fantastic story. I wish I played more competitive Brood War because it was a great game. What a little shitbird backing out like that. Just no honor, man. No honor. But Warcraft 3 is what came out next. And this is when I finally started getting into 1v1 ladder. Found out what Battle.net was. Holy shit. Warcraft 3 was the bomb. I remember when me and my brother got it, the graphics, we were like, holy crap. I remember watching a battle, because we saw someone playing it at an internet cafe before we got it, and there was like Chimera and Sorceress and the spells going everywhere. It was so much more colorful and so many more things on the screen than we were used to seeing. It's funny because you look at it compared to modern games and you think, holy shit, you could actually see what's happening in old games. You look at like a modern game of like WoW, or you look at Overwatch, there's just friggin' colors going everywhere. Until you've played it a lot, you can't decipher what's on the screen. I remember we were like that with Warcraft 3 when it first came out because there was so many colors and so many beautiful images to process. I still do love the graphics and the way they did that in Warcraft 3. But yeah, we played a lot. We got on the ladder really quickly after we started playing, me and my brother. Me and Ant, my bro, he started getting really competitive in 1v1 after a while. I remember we both started playing team games a lot at first. Me especially, I love team games. I loved it when my ally would lose, would leave the games. Then I could control their units, so I'd have like the double gank power to instantly kill an enemy's hero, and I'd get that underdog feeling of I'm macroing 2 bases. I'm such a badass. Of course, Warcraft 3 macro is like build a peon once every 2 minutes, like that. Build a burrow once every 2 minutes. It's literally all you need to do. It's such an easy game to macro. It's all about the micro and the positioning and how you creep. But I thought I was a boss. I thought it was awesome. I remember we used to disconnect every now and then back then. The internet was pretty unstable. We played on US West, and we'd have like 3 or 4 second delay. Not that I noticed or cared. Didn't even realize it was handicapping me at the time. But I remember I would list my disconnects in my profile. I would specifically, because your win-loss, they're like 40 wins, 40 losses in 2v2 or something. And I'd be like, on my profile, but 13 disconnects 2v2, 8 disconnects 1v1, because people needed to know that my win rate was better than what it actually said there. Fortunately, I don't think I ever did the unplug the modem disconnect. I don't think I ever did that because I think that still counted as a loss in Warcraft 3 if I remember correctly. But I distinctly remember listing disconnects on my profile to protect my ego, which is so embarrassing when I look back on it. But I got really into team games. I remember my brother was getting more into 1v1. He started trying out for clans, so I started joining some of the clans that he would join naturally because he was still kind of my mentor. He's the guy who'd be much better at games than me in strategy and show me how to play. And eventually he got a clan tryout for this really good clan. I'm sure they were terrible in the grand scheme of things, but to us, these guys were the shit. I can't remember their name because they merged just afterwards with a different clan called FTR, Fight to Reign. But basically, he got in, and he got me a tryout as well. And because I mostly played team games, but I still thought I was pretty good, because I still 1v1'd my brother whenever we could at the internet cafe and stuff. So I had a really low 1v1 level. And the guys in the clan were like, no, we're not going to take him, he's shit. And I was like, no, what the fuck, man? I'm really good. Look at my 2v2 win-loss record. And remember, half of those losses are disconnects. And these guys are just shaking their head like, oh my God, who is this fucking pleb? Who is this guy who thinks he's good? And I was like, no, trust me, I'm really good. Give me a tryout. I will smash whoever. Like, I'm awesome. I remember being quite nervous because I really wanted to be on this clan with my brother. I had like a gaming umbilical cord to my brother, I think. I always wanted to kind of play the games he did and do the stuff he did because I looked up to him a lot. So he got me this tryout and they made me play like this level 25 player. I think he was like a human player or something. I was like level 12 in 1v1, but I was like, oh, but I'm actually much better than that. I just don't play 1v1 that much. And I remember they all thought I was going to get crapped on. There's like 6 dudes from the clan in there watching. My brother's like, yeah, what are you going to do? What build? He's sitting next to me. He's like, ask me. And I'm like, I know, I've got this really cool tower rush build. Cheesiest build ever. I don't think I even knew what cheese was back then. I was like, yeah, I've got a good tower rush. I'm going to do this. Did this like super janky tower rush. Built a bunch of towers outside his base. Had like a demolisher rock up. I had no multitasking, so I could never win against someone that high level because they'd creep like 2 groups at once and stuff. And I could only creep 1 group at once because I just played with like my 40 APM or whatever, right? But yeah, this tower rush, I had him on the ropes. I was almost beating him. I remember I was like so nervous and I was like bringing more grunts in, rallying, and Demolisher arrived, but then he got like a mortar out and killed a tower. And I don't know, he was actually microing well the whole time and doing all this cool stuff. And eventually he held it, but he was really close to losing. And I remember this being one of my first really proud moments because the guys were like, holy shit, you're actually way better than your level. Like, you're pretty good. You almost beat him. Like, yeah, you're in, man. You're in. So I got into the clan. I was super proud. And this is around the time I started getting more into 1v1. Because right after that, we merged with 2 other clans and we formed FTR, Fight to Reign. And I don't think anyone was competitively good, but there was this thing called the clan ladder system. And you had a shared experience ladder bar for your entire clan. So anyone that would play 1v1, it would contribute to this. Anyone that played 2v2 would contribute to the 2v2 ranking of the clan. And the clan was super like, we need to be rank 1 on US West. We've got to be the best. Not that that means anything in terms of pro play. So we'd all hop on and we'd all be motivating each other to play over and over again. We'd be like, you gotta get more games. We need more experience. We're second. We're so close to first. And I started grinding 1v1 really hard. So it was actually really cool that this amazing clan ladder system is actually what got me into really grinding 1v1 ladder. And I started to improve a lot. I played a lot of Orc, but then I started playing random because I was bored. I still liked, I was still pretty iffy in how I improved. I still played by feel, but I started to level up quite a bit. And it was this really cool experience where we got very involved in Warcraft 3. Eventually, my brother tried to make me learn builds because I couldn't take games off him anymore. And he was like studying builds. He started downloading replays. And this is how you watched pro games back in the day. You'd download a replay, you'd get an MP3 file, and then you'd play the replay and you'd play the MP3 file of the commentary at the same time. He started watching pro games like this. I watched a couple, but I was like, oh, this is too tedious, like having to load up the replay and download the file. But he started getting really good. And I remember he eventually got me to like look up this build. I copied this really basic, terrible build order where you expanded with mirror image first on a Blade Master and 3 peons for tanking. Horrible build, so bad. And the aim was because you'd expand so much faster than Orc players normally would, you'd mass grunts and headhunters and you'd overwhelm them. And it's a really solid build, guys. Terrible build order. A lot of people didn't know as much about competitive gaming back then, so everyone wanted to share their terrible strategies. I did that build for quite a while. But eventually I went back to just playing my own kind of by feel way. And I would say probably around the equivalent of like Diamond or low Diamond. Probably Diamond. I capped out because I just wasn't being methodical and trying to improve parts of my game. I wasn't trying to play faster. I wasn't trying to multitask. And that's where I kind of hit my limit with Warcraft 3. It was also because around this time, my parents and we moved home, and they moved our only computer to the living area, right next to the kitchen and the dining table. So there was no way to secretly play anymore. My mum was always home. I had two younger brothers at this point. They were both little babies at that point running around. I was like 14 or so. So there was just no way to play games secretly anymore, and we just couldn't play that much ladder. So I started to fall off the Warcraft 3 ladder, got kicked from my clan eventually and stuff because I just wasn't active. And I'd still have these bursts of playing a lot, but it was never consistent. So I just kind of capped out at that level, and I never really moved on from there. Later on, we played a lot of Dota at the internet cafe. I was really sad because no one would ever play Warcraft 3 with me. I got really into 1v1, but then I'd go down to Kings at the internet cafe and be like, who wants to play War 3? I see everyone opening up War 3 on their computers. I'm like, whoa, Warcraft 3 is getting popular. Let's do this. Everyone opens up a Dota game, and everyone would refuse to play Warcraft 3 because no one played 1v1. This isn't a new phenomenon. Everyone's like always talking about how StarCraft 2 is like dead, and like, oh, RTS games, it's just really hard. It's too hardcore for the modern gamer. RTS games have always been too hardcore for social gamers. 1v1 RTS has always been that way. I used to go to the internet cafe every day and no one would play with me. I'd get that occasional Brood War match, that occasional Warcraft 3 match. I remember I convinced two of my friends to play Warcraft 3 with me. They would only do it if they played 2 versus 1. And on the verge of beating them, one of them ran over and unplugged my computer and said, ha ha, you didn't beat us. I'm not even kidding, you did this. And that's how RTS games are, and that's cool because they are a more hardcore game. You can hop on and just shoot some people in CS. You can play some Dota with friends and screw around because they're more social team-based games. But you still have this big hardcore scene of people who play individually, mostly at home or at the hardcore events, the competitions that you go down to. So later on, Dota became more popular. Unfortunately, I had less and less time on computers at home. So like I said, I didn't want to play ladder at the internet cafe that much because it was too antisocial. My friends would get mad at me if I played too much ladder there. And I kind of stopped gaming as much. I'd still go to the internet cafe a bit, but it wasn't as satisfying. Dota, everyone was a bit too casual because I started always being the best in my group or one of the best in my internet cafe in Dota. And you'd have 1 or 2 friends that were pretty competitive, but everyone else would just like be the ball and chain that would drag you behind. We had games where we'd play against other groups of friends. There was like a gang of dudes who challenged us to play. Of course, we were very polite as we played them because we were afraid they were going to stab us. Halfway through the game, they had a smoke break, and we saw all the dudes suddenly run out halfway through the smoke break. The few of them were still upstairs. They suddenly ran downstairs. Apparently, one of them got jumped on the street. A bunch of guys from a rival gang jumped out of their car and started beating the shit out of him with trolley poles. This is the internet cafe scene, guys, back in 2003, 2004. And the other friends ran down. They started beating up the guys that hopped out of the car. The dudes jumped back in their car and drove off. I think the guy had to go to hospital. It was really fucked up. There was a lot of kind of brushes with this real rough part of society because everyone loved CS, everyone loved Dota, everyone loved coming to internet cafes. So these people who weren't normally in our experience of people you'd kind of run into and have these crazy experiences with them. And you'd very quickly learn who to shit talk to in game and who not to shit talk to, because you would get like beaten up or they'd take your wallet or something like that, steal your phone. So you very quickly learn, how to censor yourself when you were shit talking your opponents. But eventually high school finished. I did a lot more socializing and partying. I kind of did that generic, let's rebel and just party and drink and do all that stuff. Had a lot of fun with it. Didn't play as many games though. Eventually when I finished high school, after many years of literally just playing games and socializing and doing almost no schoolwork, I tried to study in my last year of school, still got pretty average grades, considering I was still trying to learn how to do basic maths at the start of my second last year of school because I literally just hadn't done homework in 4 years. I was a real shit. I wish I could go back in time and slap myself and tell myself to study harder. But eventually I went to uni. I got into a good uni because I was doing a basic arts course. Dropped out of university in 2007 because I just wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't driven. I was starting to fail a couple of my classes and I was like, I don't know if I really want to do this. I dropped out. I started working. I was doing a massage course. I was becoming a massage therapist because my mom wanted me to do some sort of education. So that was our agreement. She's like, get out of our house or actually learn some sort of skill. So I almost got certified as a remedial massage therapist. I was one subject away from that. But then the story of my life, I dropped out eventually. And I eventually bought a PC because I was missing something in my life. I hadn't been gaming. I was getting bored of partying and drinking and just working and having no goal. And I bought a PC, and I remember rediscovering single player games, rediscovering playing Dota with my friends and all these different games, and being like, holy shit, this is so much fun. And there was this time where I moved out of home. And because my brother's friend was moving away, we moved away just for a few months to house sit around the time I was 18 years old, maybe almost 19, in this shitty little apartment. He was overseas for a few months, and I brought my computer. I only had to work 1 or 2 days a week. I was getting paid really well, and I'd already saved up a bunch of money. I was doing my massage course like 1 day a week or 2 days a week. So I had all this free time, and all I did for 3 months was sit in this room and just play video games and watch TV. I like watched all of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I played Civilization all night, Civilization 2 Test of Time mod multiple times, even though that was like 5 years old at the time. I had all these games I hadn't played because I hadn't had access to a computer in many years, like privately outside of internet cafes, and I just vegged out so friggin' hard. And I think that's one of the happiest memories of my life, is sitting in this apartment, just playing games, watching TV, eating pizza, fucking vegging out like a crazy person. And after a few months of that, I actually like rediscovered my drive. It was really interesting. And I was like, I could feel my brain turning to mush, and I was like, I need competitive games and I need to go back to school. And I was like, bam, went back to university, applied. Because I dropped out, I had to go to a bad university. Aced my subjects there for the most part, got a couple high distinctions, had like a really good average through 2009. Started playing Dota again that year, really enjoying it. Transferred to a really good course in 2010. And of course, that's the year StarCraft II came out. So I went back to University of Sydney, doing media and communications there. I was doing a Bachelor of Arts at UWS before that, University of Western Sydney, which is one of the lower ranked universities. But I was back into a course which was very competitive, like way above my initial high school grades to get into. But then StarCraft II was about to come out. And this was a very special moment. I went on a Euro trip for about a month with some friends. We flew Korean Airlines. And as I was scrolling through the entertainment tab, I found the sports section, and I saw a big menu that said StarCraft. And I was like, hey, I remember playing that game. StarCraft in the sports tab? Whoa. And that's where we cut off the pre-gaming part and me growing up. And you'll find out more in the second part, which I'll start in just a moment.